some noise for
Orange Juice in a Blunt.
Whoreson, the story of a ghetto pimp. I could hear her heels clicking as she came down the hallway. I waited with my heart thumping loudly until she came into view. She covered my hands on the bars with hers. I could see the circles under her eyes from where she'd been crying. "Hi," she managed to say with a forced grin. "Hi, baby." I couldn't think of anything to say. Just to stand there and look at her was enough for me. "I talked to the lawyer, Whoreson. He says you're going to have to plead guilty. I don't understand." "Listen, baby," I said, and stared at her earnestly. "I ain't gonna try and give you no bullshit. You know that me and Boots ain't been together ever since Tony copped her while I was in prison, don't you?" She shook her head in reply. "I ain't got no reason to lie to you now, Janet. So this is the truth, baby." I gathered up my wits and began to lie fluently. "Before I left Detroit, baby, I saw Boots and told her I was leaving. Now, she wanted to get away from Tony, so I told her I would take her with me. I didn't say anything about us going back together, honey, but I will admit that we stopped on the highway and checked into a motel and had sex. I don't know if she got the idea in her head that I wanted her, but when we reached New York, I paid for her hotel room and gave her $50 to make it with. Then I stepped out of her life. I watched her closely to see if she was going for it. Her eyes were large, and she stared at me with complete sincerity. I believe you, honey. I really do. Maybe she was just mad about us getting together." She dropped her head and muttered quietly, "I can't help myself anyway, Whoreson. I miss my period." For a minute, her words didn't ring a bell with me. Then it came to me like a flash. "What, baby? Are you sure?" I wanted to pull the bars down and take her in my arms. Two of the young brothers came up to the bars and stared over my shoulder at Janet. I could hear them talking amongst themselves as they walked back to give me some privacy. The third one walked over to make sure, and I could hear them exclaiming that it was Janet Wilson, the singer. She shook her head and smiled up at me. "If I am pregnant, the baby has to have a name, Whoreson. I mean, I'm not going to bring any children into this world without a father." "See the lawyer, baby," I said happily. "He can arrange it so we can have a quiet marriage in the jail. We won't be able to have a honeymoon for at least 3 or 4 years, but when we do, it will be beautiful." "That's all for now, miss," the guard said quietly as he walked up. "We'll be taking them over to the courtroom shortly, so if you want to see him again, I advise you to wait over there." I watched her walk away. She glanced back over her shoulder, and I managed to get my hand through the bars far enough to wave. As I watched her leave, it didn't disturb me any longer that I was on my way back to prison. That was the way the cookie crumbled. I had played the game, and now I had to pay the dues. There were no more tears of frustration in the back of my eyes, because I knew I would not do this time alone. I had a woman who would be there right with me, writing and visiting until I came home. And now I knew there would be a real home somewhere in my future. A house full of love. The many lonely nights that were before me wouldn't be lonely anymore. There would be no need to reach down inside myself in the darkness, seeking strength, fighting back the tears of loneliness and despair as I told myself that a man didn't cry. The stark reality of the bars and gray walls that would be part of my life for the next few years held no fear. If Janet had me a boy child, how beautiful the world would be. He would never have to experience the poverty and vice of the slums. I bit my lip as I tried to remember the old toast an old Khan had once told me. It fitted me to a T. The jungle creed said the strong must feed on any prey at hand. I was branded a beast and sat at the feast before I was a man. Yes, that was it. And that had been my problem. I had been introduced to too much game at too young an age. As I stared through the bars, I began to see myself more clearly. In the past 4 hours, I had finally grown up. I knew now that I'd never again put myself in the position where a woman could send me to prison on a whim. Not again in this lifetime. I knew where I was going now. Maybe I didn't know when I'd get out, but whenever I did, there would be another way of life waiting on me. One I didn't know anything about, except that there would be truthfulness between me and my woman, and deceit would be a thing of the past. I smiled at the thought. I had a lot to learn, but I had a lot of time to learn it in. I glanced at the 3 young boys huddled together on the bench. They were young and wild, and life had been unkind to them. Maybe one of them would find his way while in prison to a life away from vice and corruption, and most of all, away from the streets of broken dreams.